Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Danielle Stackis, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. We're excited that you're able to join us for today's webinar, Re-Entering the Workforce, presented by Dolores Daly, Associate Director of Full-Time MBA Career Coaching at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. This webinar is part of the Smith Office of Alumni Relations Professional Development webinar series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that will help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. During the webinar, we encourage you to use the chat box to share any questions or comments you might have for the presenter. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the session, and Dolores will address them at the end of the presentation. Dolores is a certified career coach for the full-time MBA program in the Office of Career Services at the Smith School. She brings with her over 12 years of Wall Street experience. While on this street, she worked for several bulge bracket investment firms in a variety of capacities, including equity research, campus recruiting, training and development, and business support operations management. Immediately prior to joining Smith, she was the Assistant Academic Director at an English language school in Manhattan, where she started as an instructor. Dolores began her career as a legislative assistant for the U.S. House of Representatives Subcommittee on Telecommunications and Finance. She has successfully re-entered the workforce twice. Dolores received an MPA from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs and a BA in Political Science from Hobart and William Smith Colleges. And now we'll get started. Dolores, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here with you today. As was just mentioned, I have re-entered the workforce on 2 occasions, and I'm happy to share my experiences with you, as well as some other people I've interviewed prior to doing this webinar who have also re-entered the workplace. So let's quickly get started. So again, a little bit about my background. I have a BA from Hobart and William Smith Colleges in Political Science and an MPA, which is a Master's of Public Administration from Columbia University. As I've mentioned, I have left the job force on 2 occasions. The first was in June of 2003, when I actually voluntarily left the workforce. I've been working for a large investment bank for 5 years, and it was an extremely demanding job, and basically I was burnt out. So I left my job, which at the time I was a vice president and the head of equity, campus recruiting, and training for Credit Suisse First Boston. And I took almost 2 years off. I spent most of that time traveling. And when I re-entered, which was in March of 2005, I went back into the same industry. So I went to work for another investment bank, which was a Bank of America Securities, but in a slightly different function. I was no longer doing campus recruiting. I was focusing mostly on training and development. And I did get that position through a contact that she was working at Bank of America and had previously worked with me at Credit Suisse. So definitely keep up with contacts. They will certainly help you if you do decide to re-enter the marketplace. I was there until I was laid off during the financial crisis. Bank of America merged with Merrill Lynch, and I was one of the people laid off as a result of that. And this time again, I took almost 2 years off. I did a lot of traveling, did some volunteer work teaching English as a foreign language in Vietnam, went back and got certified to do that. And then in February of 2011, I went back to work, but in a completely different role, in a completely different capacity, working at an English language school as an instructor, and then eventually as the Assistant Academic Director. And then finally, once again, in May of 2013, when I came to Smith, I switched roles again. So now I am in a coaching capacity, sort of doing the reverse of what I was doing at Credit Suisse. Instead of hiring MBAs to work at a bank, I'm now coaching students to try to get jobs in the financial services industry. All of this is to say is that, you know, I have changed my careers several times. It can be done. It does take some work, but it is definitely possible. So I'm going to start off by first having us take a look at the current state of the marketplace. Right, so as you may know, we're in a really tight labor market. The U.S. employment number, which came out last week, is at 3.8%. It's even lower for those with college degrees, and even further lower for those with a master's degree. Also, women make up right now 50% of the U.S. workforce, and 70% of the women in the workforce have children under the age of 18. Right, so there is a strong representation of women in the labor force right now, and there's a tight labor market. All these are favorable to those women who want to re-enter the marketplace. Additionally, there is a changing demographic going on where our population is aging, so more of the baby boomers are leaving the marketplace, and millennials are now the largest generation comprising the workplace. So 35% of the workplace right now are millennials versus 33% of Gen X and 25% of baby boomers. There's also an increase in the number of female graduates in the workplace. As of last year, 57% of people receiving a college degree were women. And additionally, it is harder now for international students who want to stay in the United States to work after they graduate, either from college or from a master's program, to stay in the United States to work, because it's harder and harder to get an H-1B visa. On top of this, there is a technological revolution going on in most industries, and it's disrupting the industries. So technology is changing things really rapidly, and therefore it's changing the types of roles and the skills necessary to do these roles. So as a result of that, it's been reported by the Manpower Group that 67% of companies are having a really hard time finding qualified candidates. And approximately 1/3 of the companies are reporting a lack of applicants, period, with another 27% saying that the people who do apply lack either technical or soft skills required for their open positions. I want to highlight the soft skills portion for just a second. I think most people are aware of the technological demands of most jobs now, but what has been somewhat lost, and what we hear often from employers, is that it's really hard to find people who have the ability to problem solve, the ability to deal with ambiguity, and the ability to communicate cross-functionally. So these skills are actually being somewhat lost in the millennial generation, and they are very important skills. So please keep that in mind, that as you continue to look for work, if you're looking or you're about to, these skills really have a lot of value. So because of all these changes and the lack of talent in the marketplace, employers are going to have to make some adjustments, and they have been making adjustments. So a lot of employers are now embracing flexibility in work schedules. So 30% of companies are exploring different types of models, whether it's contract or freelance or remote. They're also looking at different demographics and age ranges. And in particularly, they're tapping into returning parents. They're looking into boomerang retirees, and also people who just want to work part-time. So this is all positive news for all of you. And as I've already mentioned, skill set development is going to be a constant from here on forward. So just because you don't have a skill set now doesn't mean an employer is not willing to train you, because most likely they are training their current employees already, right? So what we've heard is that what you are likely to learn is becoming more important than what you already know, right? So again, this goes to the continual changes in the marketplace due to the disruption caused by technology. So I know that re-entering the marketplace is sometimes intimidating, whether you've only been out for 6 months or if you've been out for 15 years. I definitely had some apprehensions when I was going back into the marketplace, having not been in it for 2 years both times. And it does make you feel a little insecure with your skill sets, and concerned about the ability to get hired, maybe back in the same type of role, or will companies even look at you? But keep this in mind as you are looking, that many people face these same obstacles when they go back to work, and the key is to overcome them, right? So further on in the webinar, I'll talk about ways in which you can close some of these gaps. Interestingly enough, employers have some of the same concerns when they are looking to hire people who have been out of the workplace for a period of time. But since there is an overlap, this means that you can prepare to quiet these concerns by doing re-entry prep work, right? So since you kind of know what the concerns are and you have some of them, you can take this time before you actually start your job search to overcome any kind of skills gap, any kind of doubt gap that you may have. So where to start, right? I know the job search might seem a little bit daunting, but if you break it out into steps, it will become much easier. Also, I think if you give yourself a little bit room to breathe and acknowledge that this return process may not be a straight line, it will be easier for you to persevere and get through some of the hurdles that you will encounter, and everyone encounters them in the job search, and be able to overcome them and persevere to get the job that you want. So I've kind of broken it out into several different categories, and this is the order that has been recommended by many experts to help women return to the workplace, and not just women, but anyone who's been out of the workplace. So most importantly, you want to know why you want to come back into the workplace. You really want to take charge, own this job search. You want to do your research into what you want to do and form a hypothesis. You want to update your experience, so that might mean closing the gap in some technology skills that you need to maybe become used to and improve upon. Update your storyware, which means your resume and a LinkedIn profile. Practice interviewing and network. Right? So we'll go over all of these in a little bit more depth. So first, we're going to do some visualizations, and I want you to think about your future self. Where do you see yourself if you decide to go back to work? What kind of environment are you in? Are you in a professional environment where you have to wear a suit every day, or are you in a more casual environment? Are you working full-time? Are you working part-time? Right? These are all things that I want you to visualize. Are you working from home? Right? So visualize yourself in whatever kind of role that you want to move towards, and it will definitely be easier for you to move towards that goal. And you also want to find your why. Right? Why do you want to go back to work? It's really important to think about this before you actually start your search. It will give you clarity and peace of mind. Some of you may have heard of this author or motivational speaker called Simon Sinek. He's written a bunch of books, including one that's called Start with Why, another one that's called Find Your Why. And he believes that the why is the purpose, cause, or belief that drives every single one of us. He actually does a really great TED Talk on this topic if you're interested in watching that. And the why is different for everybody, right? So some possibilities may be these for why you want to go back to work. But knowing your why, according to Simon, then you'll find your way, right? So once you understand why you want to go back to work, what's driving this new interest, it'll help achieve somewhat of a peace of mind, and it will give you clarity. The next step is to do a personal inventory. Ask yourself some of these questions, right? What fulfills me? What are you good at? What drains me? What do your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, or former coworkers think you do well? What is important to you? What values do you hold close to your heart? And when have you been most fulfilled? What were you doing? With whom were you doing it? Where was it? And when was it? And then finally, what would a previous boss say about me? Oftentimes, people you used to work for are great resources, and they are able to point out skill sets or your work style in a way that you may not even realize. So these are some questions that you may want to kind of, ask yourself and actually write down so you have additional clarity in the type of role that you're looking to go into and with whom you want to work. Next, you want to think about what you want to do. And this is probably the most intimidating part of the job search, but embrace it, right? Because this is a time of transition. It's a time to explore whether or not you want to go back into the field you left, or if you're interested in going into a new field, right? So if you're interested in going back into your old field, you definitely want to look to see what's changed. How has technology changed the environment? Has there been consolidation in your industry? Are the words different, how they describe the job? So as an example, human resources is now talent management. So the wording is going to be very important, especially when you create your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So you're going to want to do some research, obviously, into, what function or role. Do you have an industry preference, location? Again, do you want to work full-time, part-time, or are you flexible at the office, or do you want to work from home? And this is probably the hardest one. Do you want to go back into your same industry, or are you comfortable changing industries and starting over in an entry-level position? Finally, travel. For some people, it's a deal breaker, so definitely think about that and ask about that in any interviews you may have, how much traveling, if any, is involved. What we do here at Smith for our new MBA students is we give them a career leader assessment, and it is an assessment that helps people determine what their areas of interest are from an industry and function perspective. So some of you may be interested in taking that assessment, and again, it's called Career Leader. Okay, so now you kind of decided that you want to go back to work. You've done some research into the types of role or industry that you're interested in, and now you really need to prepare for the true re-entry into the job market, right? So as my boss puts it, you need to do the push-ups. You need to allow yourself the time to get ready before you start your job search. And it may take longer than you're going to think. So we recommend that you start closing the gap on your skill set, probably at least 3 to 4 months before you actually start your job search. And during this process, definitely be open-minded to new experiences or to changing your mind, right? So you may find that you're more interested in going into a role that has to do with experiences that you've been involved in since you left the workplace, such as education, or maybe to an organization that you've done some volunteer work in. So keep that in mind also as you're going through the process. So first, you want to research your target industry. And there are resources online that will help you do this. The Vault Guide is one of the guides that we recommend our MBA students looking at. Many of our MBA students are career changers, so this really helps them delve deeply into the industry that they're interested in, and then that goes more deeply into the functions within those industries. So that's a great resource. Also, LinkedIn is an excellent resource. If you have an idea of the title of the role that you're interested in, you just type that in and it'll pull up profiles of people who are in those roles, and you can see what their backgrounds are, what their skill sets are. All this is important information for you to put on your resume and also on LinkedIn, or acquire those skills if you don't have them yet. Also, if you're uncertain of titles of jobs that are available within your industry of choice, I always recommend students look on Indeed.com, and you can set job alerts for yourself. So let's say you are interested in being a marketing brand manager. If you just type that into LinkedIn, or excuse me, to Indeed.com, and you can also list the location, you will get automatic feeds into your email with the job postings. And what's important about this is, one, you'll start to learn the companies that are hiring, and two, again, you'll get an idea of the skills required to get a job like this. And that will give you more information about, what gaps you need to close, what skill sets you need to address. As I've already mentioned, you can look on LinkedIn if you type in certain search words. That will pull up different people's profiles, and that's a great way, honestly, to learn a little bit more about the roles that are out there and the experiences people had to transition into those roles or to get to those roles. So always looking at people's profiles on LinkedIn is something we advise our students to do. Also volunteer strategically, right? If you're working at an organization and they want somebody to lead a fundraising effort, it's a great skill to have on your resume. Or if you are asked to make presentations in front of a board, again, presentation skills, communication skills, as I've noted, are extremely important to employers. So definitely highlight that. You can always take an online class, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, types of classes that are available. Join local organizations. In the DC area, there are a lot of national organizations. So definitely, do some research to see if there's any organizations in your area of interest and start going to their meetings. A lot of times they have mentorships. So it's a great networking opportunity and a way to, learn a little bit more about your industry and meet people in that industry. Then also, attending local conferences is another way. And subscribe to professional journals. Start reading periodicals, magazines, whatever covers your area of interest, so that you are starting to learn what the main challenges are within the industry, learn the lingo, just learn a little bit more about it and get yourself in, in shape. You're doing your push-ups so that you are well informed when you start looking for a job. Thankfully, there is a lot of help out there, which I have found as I was doing my research for this webinar, to help women transition back into the workplace. So all these organizations that I've listed here have either online programming, in-person workshops, career coaching, podcasts, all sorts of things that are specifically designed to help women return to the workplace. So I know we're going to send out this presentation after the fact, so you don't need to write anything down. But here are some organizations that I found that help women specifically. And I actually signed up for the I Relaunch online class. It's $75, and it's an extensive prep class to get you ready to return to the workplace. So take a look at all of these. And then finally, more and more companies are having what are called re-entry programs. I know almost all of the investment banks have them. I think a lot of the consulting firms have them, and probably other industries have them as well. In order to know when these are available, you'd have to look at the specific company's website. I just looked at, let's see, Morgan Stanley's last night, and I know that they have several re-entry programs all over the world, and they run from February to May every year. So, just take a look if that's something you think you're interested in. These programs, train people, and you're paid for the period of time you're there. And then you may or may not end up with a full-time position at that company, but you will end up with some great training and contacts if you do decide to pursue this avenue. There are also classes online specifically to help you develop some of the hard skills. So whether it's as simple as learning how to use Excel or PowerPoint, or something more technologically inclined, such as SQL or Python. These are some places where you can go to learn these skills. So Coursera is great. I've taken some classes on Coursera. It's either free or you can pay a small fee to get a certificate in certain areas. Moms Who Code is another one that's specifically for moms. And then finally, we've started a new MicroMasters program here at the Smith School, and it's you can find it online. It's part of the edX platform. It has all of the like MBA type classes that are available here at Smith. It's actually taught by the same professors that teach most of the full-time MBA classes. And those who successfully complete all the MicroMasters credentials are eligible to apply for admission to the online MBA program. And if you're accepted, I think 14 credits will be transferred, which is about 25% of the total credits you would need to graduate from the program. So if you really are focused on maybe going back and getting your MBA, this could be one avenue to explore. And additionally, there are placement organizations. So all this should be telling you that there is definitely an appetite for women to return to the marketplace, because there are extensive organizations that are involved with this particular job set. And so that should be a positive indication for all of you. These are all specifically placement organizations. So Inkwell is more focused towards executive candidates. Flex Professionals actually is a local organization. They're in Fairfax, Virginia. So if you're local, you may want to look into them. And then the last two are Mom Core and Mom Project. So all of these have like job placements or job boards specifically for moms returning to the workplace. Next thing you want to focus on is creating what we call your career storyware. So what that means is your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Many of the organizations that I just mentioned do offer coaching on how to create your resume or how to create a LinkedIn profile, but they also offer webinars on these as well. So if you need some extra help in preparing these documents, definitely reach out to some of these organizations. It is worth the investment, especially your LinkedIn profile, because that's where so many people are going to look for employees. As far as updating your resume, I have at the end of this presentation listed a link to the different resume templates that the Smith School uses, as well as some resume guidelines. So you can feel free to look at those, or create your own. If you decide to create your own, here are some things that you should think about, right? So your resume should be one that highlights your transferable skills, right? The skills that you've developed either through your previous work experience or any kind of volunteer or part-time work you may have been doing. And you want to look at the skills, right? What skills do you have? And then compare that to the skills that your potential employer is looking for. And as best you can, highlight just those skills on your resume. You want to start with a summary of your qualifications. So I wrote one up for myself. I actually used this when I was trying to get my current job. This was my summary of qualifications, or part of it. And then in your experience section of your resume, you want to include all paid jobs, whether it was a paid job during your gap period or it was a job before you left the workplace. If it's a job that you did during your gap and it is related to the area you want to transition into. Definitely highlight any sort of specific skills or projects you worked on, even if it was a part-time job. Highlight that, because those are skills that are newly developed and may be relevant to the job that you are trying to get into. If it's not related to the job that you want to move into, keep it very brief. Maybe just list the title and the years that you were there, and maybe one bullet point mentioning an accomplishment during your time, but don't make it the focal point of your resume. And then again, list all other jobs that you had before you took your leave, and highlight your transferable skills. One of the people I was speaking to in preparation for this webinar mentioned that she had listed sales skills on her resume because she had done some sales before, but it's not necessarily what she wanted to go into. And so she was getting a lot of calls for straight sales jobs. And so she learned, I need to remove that part from my resume, even though it was something I did in a previous role, but it's not something that I want to do going forward. And she chose to highlight other skills that she had developed from her previous jobs and leave that one out. And then in your education section, definitely include any relevant training you took during your gap period. So, you know, if you took some Coursera classes, or you took some type of PowerPoint class or whatever it is, definitely include that on your resume in the education section. And then any volunteer work you want to put at the bottom, you can call it distinctions. That's what we call it on our resume templates, but that goes at the bottom of the resume. And now LinkedIn is really the next step that you want to do, right? So once you have your resume done and you've always thought about the skills you want to highlight and what are transferable, and you know the job that you want to move into, the next step is creating your LinkedIn profile. For some of you, LinkedIn may not have existed when you left the workplace, but it's really now a very crucial part of your job search storyware. And that's why a LinkedIn profile really is necessary. Employers go to LinkedIn, about 75% of employers will go to LinkedIn to learn more about a particular candidate that they're interested in. Other times, people looking to hire will type in certain keywords and try to find people that way, identify people who have those skill sets, and that's how they would get in touch with you, through your LinkedIn profile, and not necessarily, you know, through your resume or by you actually applying to a job that they may have open. So these are the 6 profile sections of a LinkedIn profile: education, your photo, your experience, any kind of volunteer experience, your skills, which are very important, and the summary, right? So all these are important parts of your LinkedIn profile. A photo is very important because this is where you make your first impression. You're more likely to be viewed if you do have a profile, or should be a picture on your profile. It should definitely be a professional photo. And as it says here, you should be alone, from the shoulders up, with a neutral background. You can take the photo with your cell phone. It doesn't have to be a fancy photographer, but just make sure that it is a professional photo. The next part is building your headline, right? So this is a very important part of your LinkedIn profile. It's limited to 120 characters. So you want to use this space with the most important words, your keywords, that are the same type of words that employers are looking for the jobs that you want to transition into. So keywords will increase your searchability or search engine optimization, right? So as I mentioned, employers will, you know, type in certain keywords if they're looking for that skill set and the role they're trying to fill. And you want to make sure that your profile is pulled up during that query. To help you do that, again, you want to look at several job descriptions with the titles of the job that you're looking for. And again, I recommend Indeed.com as a great resource to use, but you can also use LinkedIn because they do have job postings on LinkedIn as well. Also look at profiles of people who are in the job that you want to transition into. And again, look to see what skill sets they have highlighted on their LinkedIn profile. And if you have those skill sets, highlight them. Here are some categories that you can use to help you develop your headline. So you can, put your prior work experience or, leadership roles in organizations, any professional organizations that you work for. Again, these are key words that you want to highlight. And I have a couple of examples here of the first one is actually my manager. The second one, the CX strategist, is taken from an alum who graduated about 3 years ago. And then the last one is one of our current students. So you can see this is how different people decided to highlight what's important to them, and they've decided it's important to them because it's important to the employer or the role in which they're trying to translate into. The next section is building your summary, right? So this is where you can tell a little bit about yourself, right? So it tells your professional story. Again, it's an opportunity for you to specifically talk about the value that you will add to future employers, right? What have you done in the past that makes you marketable? And usually employers will look to see what past experiences, or more importantly, what past skills you've developed in those experiences that are transferable to your next role. This is where it can be much more casual than your resume. So you want to open with a strong statement. Many people tell their story in this section in the first person. It should be conversational, and it should show a little bit about your personality. Again, specifically how you can add value. And again, it can be first person. The first 2 lines are the most important because, again, that's where you should be placing all of your keywords. And if you're looking at somebody's profile, the first 2 lines are the only ones that are actually visible unless you click on the drop-down bar where you can see more. So you want to make those first 2 lines really impactful. The next section is your experience section. And again, it's really important, as you can see here, profiles are 36 times more likely to be looked at if they list the experiences. And it's really important for you to list all of your past experiences. Here, you don't want to copy directly from your resume, right? You want to just pull out the keywords, describe what you accomplished using those keywords, and you want to use facts, right? Facts are very important. So you want to state what you did, and the reader will be able to conclude who you are, right? So you want to use, again, keywords to improve your SEO, and you want to be very specific. So here we've listed a couple of examples. So instead of saying big increase, you could say 20% increase. Large customer base, over 5,000 customers, right? This information is much more specific and helps the person viewing your profile form a mental picture of what you were doing. And that's really important for them to be able to visualize what they think you were doing and how that might match up to what type of person they're looking for the role that they are recruiting for. And then the next section is skills, right? So this is where you, again, you can highlight all of your skills that are important to the role that you're going into. I want to caution against just completing this section and just dumping all your skills in here with the hopes that the search engine will identify you because you have these skill sets listed. You will quickly be put to the side if an employer sees this because they really are looking for more information about how that skill set enabled you to be successful in a previous role. So You do want to highlight skills, but you also don't want to have this be the only part of your LinkedIn profile that you really spend time on. And then finally, it's a summary. So again, what you're interested in, what you're good at, and what your career goals are. So those are all the main components of a LinkedIn profile. Again, you are certainly able to hire someone to help you design your LinkedIn profile, and it may be worth it for you to hire somebody to do both your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Also, LinkedIn itself has a lot of online webinars to show you how to create a LinkedIn profile, so that's another resource available to you as well. Now that you've done all of this other work, right, you've decided what you want to do, you've created your resume, you've created your LinkedIn profile, you're now ready for the next step, which is getting out there and talking to people about yourself, which is the next probably intimidating part of this whole process. But it is necessary in conducting a job search, because more likely than not, you're going to hear about an opportunity through somebody you know, or someone you've been introduced to, or somebody that you meet either in person at a networking event, or actually through online, right? You can reach out to people on LinkedIn who may be alums of the Smith School, or if you went to a different undergraduate school, alums of that school as well. People are willing to talk to you when you're seeking information. So that's the key to connecting to people who you may not know or who you haven't spoken to in a long time. You want to first ask for information, and then people love to talk about themselves. So they're likely to give you a lot of information about their role, what they did to get there, and all of this will help you when you're crafting your story, because it will introduce you to what's important to an employer, what skill sets to hire, what is the language used within that role or industry. So it's really important to do networking. And these are all opportunities for you to utilize in order to increase your network. Next is practicing interviewing. And unlike maybe what you experienced before you left the workplace, more and more first-round interviews are done either by the telephone or virtually, right? So you want to prepare for all of those. In particular, if you're doing a virtual interview, you want to make sure that whatever the person is seeing that's behind you is a clean area. You also want to make sure that you're professionally dressed, at least from the waist up, and you want to make sure you're talking into the actual camera. So you might want to do a little practice doing that. But these are the three types of interviews that you will encounter during your job search. You also want to make sure that you are ready to answer really basic questions, such as, why do you want to go back to work? Why this company? Why this role? And practice these answers, and practice answering other types of questions. And your answers should be about 2 minutes long. So all of this takes practice. I tell my MBA students, nobody is good at this naturally. You have to practice before you interview. So definitely spend some time doing that. And I know all of these organizations I mentioned do have interview practice sessions. So that could be an opportunity for you as well. And then I'm going to quickly go through a couple of stories of people I interviewed who have their own success stories of re-entering the marketplace. The first one is actually one of my coworkers. She left the workplace for the first time because of the birth of her twin boys. And at the time, she had 10 years of work experience in this marketing role. She left the workforce for 2 years. Then her first re-entry position, she started working for her former employer for 30 hours a week. And she said she really spent time maintaining relationships with people in her office. She would constantly email them. She would attend any social gatherings that went on. So she kept up those relationships, which was really important to her and for her when she wanted to go back into the workplace. She did the 30 hours a week for her former employer for about 18 months. And then she went back into a full-time role with a federal contractor for a year. And it was too much. Her boys were still pretty young, and she was working more than 40 hours. So it was something that she felt like she couldn't continue. So she pulled back, which is what many people do. And she went back to 12 hours a week. And she was doing marketing at a different association. And all these roles she got through her network. She was there for 18 months. And then she decided that she really wanted to pursue a different career. So she went back to school to get her master's in organizational counseling, and she continued to do freelance work for a former employer. She did an internship as part of her degree program to get experience. And then she ended up getting a full-time role here at the Smith School. And what she wanted me to mention is that she actually interviewed for a different role initially, which she didn't get, which I didn't think was a good fit for her because there's a lot of night activities, and it would have been hard for her to do the night activities. But she performed very well in the interview, so they invited her back for a different role, and that's the role that she ended up in as a career coach for the undergraduates at the Smith School. And this is 11 years after she first withdrew from the job market. So that's an example of somebody who kind of kept her feet in the job market, but really didn't go back full-time for 11 years. The second story is a personal friend of mine. She left the workforce partially after her first child was born, but she went back pretty quickly after 4 months and started doing some freelance work in the same business, which was publishing, but not for the same employer. And she did this for 3 years. She finally left the workforce after her fourth child was born, or right before her fourth child was born, and she was out completely for 11 years. Why she wanted to return was she finally had some free time to commit, but she needed a flexible schedule because she does have 4 children, and they have a lot of sports events and activities that she was constantly driving them to, and then constantly waiting at those activities. So she had some time to utilize during these waiting periods, and she wanted to use her brain again, she said. However, she did have some challenges because she had completely left the workforce and all of her contacts for 11 years. So she had to update her resume, and as I mentioned, there were some language changes. The industry had changed. It had gone through a lot of consolidation. So things had really changed, and she did find a lot of challenges because she had completely left the workforce for so long. She also learned that AOL, having that as her email address, was only going to indicate that she's, as she put it, old. So she had to change to a Gmail account. There were a lot of technological changes that had happened in the publishing workplace that she had to basically learn herself. And she had a lack of relationships within the publishing world because she had not kept them up. But what had happened in our industry is that it had undergone tremendous change, and they had outsourced most of the types of role that she did, which was as a textbook editor. So a former colleague of hers introduced her to the outsourcing firm that they used, and now she's been working freelance through this outsourcing company for about 2 years now. So that is it. I'm now wondering if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Dolores. We will go ahead and take some questions as she mentioned. As a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel.
So there is a question that says, should we list them too? I'm not sure what that is in reference to. So if the person who typed that in could give me a little bit more information, that would be great.
Dolores, this is Danielle. It says, how about unpaid startup jobs? Should those be listed as well?
If it's within the area that you want to transition into, you could list it as an internship, right? And you could put that under your experience section. So if it's something that you want to transition to and it's developing the skill sets to get you there, then yes. it okay to have a 2-page resume? We definitely advise people to have a 1-page resume, especially if they've been out of the marketplace for a long period of time. What we recommend doing is jobs that happened at least 10 years prior. You just want to list the title and the name of the company and the time you worked there. You don't necessarily have to list a description. So if you can, keep your resume to 1 page. However, if you do have extensive work experience, whether it's part-time or volunteer, then yes, you can do a 2-page resume. What coaching recommendations can you give on a potential industry change or ideal job after being home for a few years? So honestly, this is going to have to come through really self-exploration. There are many opportunities out there that some that you might not even know. So I would start thinking about, again, the questions that I ran through in the beginning. What interests you? What are you good at? Where do you thrive? What really interests you? Because you want to make sure that when you go back to work, you're doing a job that interests you. You are going to be taking time out of maybe taking care of a child or a parent or some other activity that's kept you out of the workplace. So you want to make sure the time that you're using is doing something that you want. So there are, as I mentioned, a lot of organizations that work with women to develop, their areas of interest, help them get their resumes done. There's also a lot of job boards out there specifically for women that I mentioned. And also a lot of companies will have these re-entry programs. So you might want to look into all of those. Flex professionals, if you're in the area, they do have part-time work, and they specifically hire people to do part-time work or contracting, which is what a lot of people do. So probably you want to start out doing either part-time or some sort of consulting work, just to kind of get your feet wet, get your confidence back up, get your skill sets to where you want it to be. And if you are looking just to go back part-time, then that's great. But if you're looking to go back full-time, you probably will have to take small steps to get there. Hiring older employees. This is definitely something that some people are concerned about, and it is a concern. I've heard that when you are over the age of 50, it becomes more difficult. However, I really think it depends on what you want to do. And as I mentioned, certain skill sets that those of us who are over 50 have are not necessarily those that are readily available in the marketplace. So communication skills, whether it's written or oral, are very much in demand. People who are going to show up to work on time, I hate to say it, but people who are reliable, they're looking for. People who know how to problem solve and deal with ambiguity. I can't tell you how much I hear this from employers. They want people who they can give an assignment to and who will run with it, do whatever research is needed to figure it out, and then come back with a finished product. So all those skills are really, really valuable, and those are things that you definitely should highlight. And again, I would recommend starting out, in somewhat of a part-time or consulting type of role, and explore some of these resources that I mentioned, because I think that will, help you. And also, if you do go with any of these organizations, you'll be meeting other women who are in your same situation. And so you can help one another during this period of time and give one another coaching, as well as getting coaching from the webinars, or maybe if you hire an individual coach. Also talk to those women. They may know people in the industry or the area that you're interested in moving into. So all these networks can be great resources. What specific technical skills? I think it really depends on, what you want to go into. I'm most familiar with finance because that's what I coach. So, finance, Excel, PowerPoint, and now it's becoming more some of the technical skills. So Python or SQL are some skills that I've been hearing recently. But really the best way for you to find out is to look at the job descriptions. If you're looking to be a product manager, for example, pull several different descriptions and see what the commonalities are. If you see, on all these job descriptions that they're looking for people who know Python, then you probably need to develop that skill. But it really is very specific to the type of role that you're interested in. And again, look at job descriptions, and there are plenty of places where you can learn these skills. So if it's something that you want to do, you can, and you're willing to put in the time, you can definitely learn the skill, and that'll make it more likely for an employer to want to hire you. What if I lost contact with people for a reference? Companies usually ask for 3. So yes, this is, as I mentioned, one of the challenges that people face when they go back into the workplace if they've really lost touch with former contacts. So first, I would attempt to reach out to them again, see if they are on LinkedIn, and explain that you're looking to get back into the workforce. Most people I've heard are very open to being contacted by former coworkers. So you could possibly reconnect with them over LinkedIn, and then you can ask if they're willing to do a recommendation for you. If you are unable to reconnect, I would definitely ask for recommendations if you've done any kind of volunteer work, whether it's for a charity or an organization, a school. That's another area, another way you can get recommendations. You can also get personal recommendations. So, think about what you've been doing, and even if it's not a paid role, you have developed skill sets. So reach out to the people that you feel can be most helpful to you, and see if they're willing to give you a recommendation.
Dolores, do you want to take one more question?
Sure.
I know we're running short on time here.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Where is the best place to show the gap in employment? In the resume, one-liner, or explain in the cover letter page? If you've been out of the marketplace for less than 3 years, generally speaking, we advise that you don't necessarily even highlight it. It's just not that important. On your resume, I would not recommend putting titles such as, manager of household or something like that. To me, all that does is indicate that you are out of the traditional workforce. So I would not highlight it on my resume. When you mention it, if at all, I would mention it in your cover letter. But you will probably be asked about it when you go for an interview. So if you get the interview, the person interviewing you already knows that you've been out of the workplace, and so it probably won't be a question, but it might be, why do you want to go back to work, right? That's a question you're probably going to hear in most of your interviews. One way to kind of, get over that uncomfortableness is working with one of these placement agencies that does work specifically with people who are trying to re-enter the marketplace. In that case, they are the ones who are talking to the employers, and they are the ones who are explaining to the employer that you have been out of the workplace. So if you get an interview that way, they already know that you've been out of the workplace, and you don't even necessarily have to address it.
Okay, great. Dolores, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
Just finally, I know it's it's kind of a daunting experience. I've been through it twice myself, but for shorter periods of time than maybe some of you have been through it. But as I mentioned in the beginning, we are in a really tight labor market right now. Companies need employees, and they're willing to look at people who don't necessarily have all the skills they're looking for, and they're willing to accommodate flexible schedules, more so now than ever. So be confident, know that you have skills to offer, even if you haven't been working in a traditional job for a number of years. You have skills, you are valuable, and most importantly, approach any interview with confidence, because if you think that you can do the job and you present yourself as a professional, they will think so too. So it's just going to take a little bit of time to ramp up, get your skills where they need to be. Allow yourself that time to get ready before you start the job search. Allow your time to know that you're probably going to have some failures, which everybody has in the job search, regardless of whether they're in a job right now and looking for a new job or been out of the marketplace. So prepare yourself for the uncomfortableness and maybe some of the disappointment. But if you do persevere and you know what you want to do, very important, you know what you want to do, and you can have a targeted search, you're much, much, much more likely to succeed. And I wish all of you good luck.
Well, thank you so much, Dolores. This was very informative. And for those of you who asked, we will send out the slides for the presentation, and it's also being recorded in case you want to look back at it. And it's also going to be on our website as well. So we hope you'll join us for our next webinar, 3 Financial Planning Strategies for Women, on Wednesday, March 20th at noon Eastern. We hope you all have a wonderful day, and go Terps.